Hello, everyone. Welcome once again. We are here for this press conference, which is going to discuss matters on the Green Revolution and the AGRF that's starting off next week in Rwanda. My name is Maina once again from the Biodiversity and Biosafety Association of Kenya, who are members of the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa. As we start off, I would like to give a few housekeeping rules. We are providing interpretation in French and English. To select your preferred language, please click on the globe icon on the bottom of your Zoom where it says interpretation and select the language you prefer. This afternoon or morning, we are going to have 4 speakers. Each will take a couple of minutes to share on their areas of expertise and knowledge. And after all the sharing, we'll have about 35 minutes. Later, we'll have about some few minutes to have some discussions, question and answer. You can also submit your questions. You'll find the question and answer box at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You can submit them throughout the event. We look forward to having a really enjoyable discussion and a lot of interaction in this press conference. So I'll begin giving a brief about what we're talking about today. The AGRF takes place every year, organized by AGRA, and it's the Green Revolution Forum, where donors and other partners meet and AGRA, where they discuss issues related to the push for a green revolution in Africa. But let me say something brief about AGRA. As organizations under the AFSA platform, we have been very critical of the push for the AGRA Green Revolution model. The reason is, since its foundation in 2016, AGRA, after spending or receiving over $1 billion in funding, the evaluations done on it have been very dismal. The aim was that by 2020, AGRA had said they would double productivity in Africa, and they will double incomes in Africa. Unfortunately, that has not been the case. In fact, in the countries that they work, almost 30% or half of the population, 30 million smallholder farmers, continue to face hunger. And this is a big challenge in terms of what they are doing. And so we are asking, as the Alliance of Food Sovereignty in Africa, when will we stop pushing for these green revolution models that have failed? These models have failed, and we are here today to reiterate and tell you why we are pushing for agroecology, because this is the future. And also to mention that just this week, we have had the release of a report by the German institution INKOTA, which has looked at the issues of fertilizer subsidy in Africa. AGRA has been keenly pushing for the fertilizer subsidy in Africa. Unfortunately, even with the increasing fertilizers, food production has continued to go down. And this today we are going to have this discussion and hear from our panelists. So I'm going to begin by introducing our first panelist this morning or afternoon, depending on which part of the world you are in. Our first speaker is going to be Leonida Odongo. Leonida Odongo is an activist and works for the Haki Nawiri Africa. She is Kenyan and based in Kenya, and has been a community organizer for many years, organizing community action through her initiative, the Haki Nawiri Africa, focusing on food, climate, gender justice, and youth engagement. She is also the co-chair of the SEED Working Group and a member of the Climate Action Group of the Alliance of Food Sovereignty in Africa. Welcome, Leonida Odongo. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Anne, for the introduction. We are gathered here today as African people and people of African descent. First of all, we want to say that Africa has the expertise, the requisite expertise that can be able to solve the problems of the continent. Another thing is that our problems, we are the best placed people to be able to solve our problems. We need Afrocentric solutions to our problems, and our problems ought not to be settled or resolved by people external to the continent. I'll be speaking to 4 main issues, especially with regards to AGRA. One is a focus on investment. You find that AGRA is investing a lot in chemical fertilizers, and of course on issues of seeds. And what we are seeing is that, one, our legislations end up having punitive clauses that outlaw age-old traditions, for example, within the African continent, of saving, exchanging seeds. And this is actually making farmers to shy away from saving their indigenous seeds because of these punitive clauses. And in addition, what is also happening is that the transnational corporations are influencing our policies and creating a conducive environment for them to do business. We've seen this in the push for harmonization of seed laws within the African Union. The other thing that is problematic, especially with the Green Revolution Forum, is the fact that it's focusing on agribusiness. And of course, it's pushing young people because they know that Africa is the most youthful continent, and therefore the young people are being lured into agribusiness. And as you all know, agribusiness is all about intensified chemical use on the soil, intensified use of pesticides, and of course the push for monoculture. And as you all know that with monoculture, soil is losing its fertility. And in Africa, we have almost every country, you find that it's almost 70% of the population that are food producers. And within the continent, still, we have 330 million farmers. So imagine how much AGRA is going to gain or generate in terms of, especially for, I want to point out is the fact that with these investments, there are contradictions. For example, in the Kenyan constitution, it says that in Article 43, that everyone has a right to food, adequate food that is appropriate and healthy. The question is, if our food is laced with chemicals, it's actually going contrary to what our constitution says. And if you look at various constitutions within the African continent, you'll find that they have this part that talks about healthy food. Number two, you find that in relation to climate change, like right now, we don't talk about climate change anymore in Africa. We talk about climate crisis. I bet that you've all seen what happened in Mozambique. You've all read of the hunger situation in the Horn of Africa. In Kenya, for example, where I come from, 3.5 million people are facing severe hunger. Even camels, the most hardy animals on earth, actually dying because of climate change. So the question is, coming with technologies and calling them climate smart technologies or baptizing them as climate smart agriculture is actually supposed to be climate stupid agriculture. And why do I say this? It's because, one, it's intensifying chemical use, it's intensifying pesticides on our soil, and this is when this is used on our soil, we end up eating poisonous food. It's found in our waters, and you end up becoming sick. And you find that the multinationals are the same ones that are producing, drugs for cancer and such diseases. So what the key message that I have today for Africa and for the world, that what we want is Afrocentric solutions. Our forefathers never suffered from various diseases that opening our continent is leading us to today. What we need is an ecologically produced method of food production that is healthy and culturally appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Leonida. Very great words from Leonida, Odongo from Kenya, Haki, Nawiri, Africa. In 2021, led by the Alliance of Food Sovereignty in Africa, over 200 international organizations and African organizations did a petition and sent it to the AGRA donors, asking for them to stop funding AGRA because of the dismal performance of AGRA. Also, further, the Southern Africa religious groups also sent a letter. Unfortunately, this has not made any healing system. Under the Alliance for Food Sovereignty Africa, we are a very strong network working in 50 countries, representing over 200 million farmers. And so our voice has to be heard, because at the end of the day, it is the smallholder farmer who feeds a huge proportion of the population in Africa, and they have to be supported. Leonida has started us off and has spoken about promotion of agroecology, and that is what we want to speak about today. So our second speaker this afternoon or morning, depending on where you're coming from, is Mr. Ferdinand Wafula from Biogardenning Innovations. Mr. Wafula is an agroecology practitioner trained in community-based development, biointensive, and permaculture methods. He's also a promoter and trainer of bioinputs at the farmer level for healthy soil, healthy food at Biogardenning Innovation Center, which is an organization based in Western Kenya. Welcome, Ferdinand. Let's hear from you. Thank you.
Much gratitude, Anne, and all our listeners and our viewers and those who have tuned in this press release. This is indeed a farmer and a practitioner's perspective. I'm working with farmers in the front line of extension work in Western Kenya through this organization called Biogardenning Innovation that is in partnership with AFSA. And we are one among 15 centers who are promoting healthy soils, healthy food project using bio inputs. And we are saying these bio inputs are the alternatives. And they are reviving our soils with the reintroduction of microorganisms that provide key link between crops and animals and tapping energy from the sun. And we humans are part of this animal kingdom and are supposed to be stewards in this process. And in this case, we are expected to be good stewards in the ecosystem management because we have knowledge. And apparently, the use of synthetics and are killing the microorganisms and killing our soils. I'm talking about knowledge about locally sourced inputs that are in tune with nature and existing farmers within farmers' reach. I'm talking about fermentation processes where we can use animal manure with other additives such as ashes and rock dust, and we call this bokashi. It can be prepared locally and ready for 15 days and producing amazing results on a diverse level of crops. Other recipes take maybe only 5 days, like we can have cow dung and urine with pulse flour, and we have an inoculant. And this reintroduction of microorganisms is important for good nutrition. It's important for us to produce healthy crops. And going further than this, we are also doing trials and some experiments with farmers and producing very good results and providing learning that these farmers are actually reviving their soils. And the trials are also enabling us revive some of the wild harvests, like the mushrooms, and conserving spaces where the culturally acceptable foods are also available, like insects. In Western Kenya, we have white ants, which are really a delicacy. And these are all coming from healthy soils. We also have other partners in West Africa who are doing the bioprotectants and bokashi biofertilizers on large scale and producing up to about 60 tons of bokashi that is going to the smallholder. And promoting these biofertilizers will contribute to recycling of local wastes for these healthy soils. And this can support diverse cropping and animal systems. And we do not need these chemicals. Our soils are diverse, and we have the knowledge, and the knowledge that is in tune with the ecological principles of working with nature is good for us and not against us. And Africa is not a monoculture. We want the promotion of more ecologically friendly alternatives, such as this what I've mentioned, like bokashi and native microbes. And these are best bets for people's livelihoods in Africa. And we need to take care of our soils for future generations. This the African saying that we borrow land for our children, and we urge policymakers and our governments and donors to provide more funding to these alternatives because they mitigate a huge number of issues ranging from nutrition challenges, climate crisis, and the escalating prices for commodities, because we're talking about our African governments, our African nations depending on agriculture. So these alternatives can mitigate against these challenges. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ferdinand. Thank you for sharing with us your experiences as a practitioner. One thing that when you look at the report that has been produced by INKOTA, and we'll be sharing this on our chat box, is that there is a big push for the commercial increased use of fertilizers in Africa, because as the multinationals see it as the last frontier. Some people call it the golden frontier. If you capture the African market, you'll be able to sell more. Unfortunately, these few companies that are dominating the fertilizer production chain are using their market power to capture excess profits. In Kenya, for example, their profits have increased sixfold. The prices of fertilizers have increased 2 or 3 times all over the world. A lot of dynamics behind it, the COVID-19 pandemic, the Russia-Ukraine war, the increasing cost of energy. And when we have high energy prices, there are supply issues. It leads to decreased food production, and this will translate to higher foods. And this will be the next, some people say the next world war will be about food, water, and other basic commodities. Our third speaker this morning or evening or afternoon is Anuradha Mittal. She's the executive director of the Auckland Institute, an independent policy think tank. Its research and advocacy are focused on supporting communities around the world who face dispossession and loss of livelihoods under the pretext of so-called development schemes. Welcome, Anuradha.
Thank you very much. The drum roll in preparation of the AGRF has started, using the food price crisis to promote industrial agriculture agenda for Africa. One partner of AGRA that works closely with agrochemical corporations is the African Development Bank, who we have been studying closely at the Auckland Institute. The bank's $1.5 billion African Emergency Food Production Facility, supposed to address the food crisis, is actually all about expanding industrial agriculture with increased reliance on inputs like improved seed and chemical fertilizers. It ignores the call by millions of African smallholder farmers for the urgently needed transition to sustainable agroecological practices. In line with AGRA and its donors, African Development Bank is working for the corporations. Its plan to increase fertilizer use is a long-standing goal of agribusinesses who are eager to devour Africa as the new market. The bank was to supply about 500,000 tons of fertilizer to West Africa alone by the end of August. Furthermore, after consultation with fertilizer company CEOs, It is working to secure commitments from African governments on implementing policy reforms on fertilizer. The fact that an emergency program involves policy reforms to facilitate easy trade of fertilizers is appalling, given Africa's long history of colonial exploitation and theft, including through painful structural adjustment programs. African Development Bank has seized the latest food price crisis to push the same corporate-led agriculture development strategy that has been the core of its agenda for years. Key goals of the bank's 2016 strategy for agricultural transformation in Africa were already to expand the use of commercial inputs and liberalize the input markets. But is this what the African farmers want or need? Who is this agenda catering to? Increasing fertilizer use in much of the world is not possible, given already high usage rates or environmental regulations. Africa is thus coveted as the last expansion market for agrochemical companies. Average fertilizer application per hectare in sub-Saharan Africa is 17 kilograms of nutrients, a fraction of the global average of 135 kilograms. Efforts to expand use are not motivated by making up for disruptions in supply of fertilizer and cereals from the war in Ukraine, but actually driven by the goal of making African farmers dependent on commercial inputs. So who benefits? With high commodity prices, many of the largest publicly listed companies producing fertilizer, nitrogen, phosphate, and potash, they saw revenue and stock prices skyrocket in 2022. The Canadian company Nutrien took in a record $5 billion in net earnings in the first half of 2022. Yara International reported a first quarter operating income of $1 billion, compared to $322 million a year earlier. In the same quarter, Mosaic saw an increase in earnings per share of over 250% compared to the year-ago quarter. Seed and pesticide companies are also making a killing. Agribusiness giant Bayer is trumpeting outstanding sales and earnings growth and particularly substantial gains in agriculture business. Use of scarce public funds to further enrich agrochemical companies is especially egregious considering these record profits of the corporations during the crisis. Amidst a worsening climate crisis with its devastating impact on the poorest on the planet, the African Development Bank is still pandering to the corporations. Synthetic nitrogen fertilizer supply chain was responsible for estimated emissions of 1.13 gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalent in 2018. This represented 10.6% of agricultural emissions. Food and Agriculture Organization has predicted that worldwide use of synthetic nitrogen fertilizers will see a 50% increase from the 2012 level by 2050. This will in turn lead to a large increase in nitrous oxide emissions from agricultural soils, potentially threatening the Paris Agreement climate target of keeping global warming within 1.5 or well below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial temperatures. While the African Development Bank pawns the continent to agrochemical corporations, you are hearing from African colleagues about millions of African farmers who are challenging the bondage that the agribusiness want to put them in. They're also showing the way forward with multitude of environmentally sustainable practices and innovations in agriculture, which will feed the continent and the world and help cool the planet. This is what should be funded. Officials who are not corrupt gathering at the AGRF should hear this and act on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to reiterate that we, as the Alliance of Food Sovereignty in Africa, call on funders to stop funding AGRA or the Green Revolution models and initiate and put money into supporting agroecology, which is the future of sustainable agricultural practices and agroecology. Our next speaker is Gabriel Manyangadze. Gabriel Manyangadze is the program manager at the Southern Africa Faith Communities Environmental Institute, which is based in South Africa. He is himself based in Zimbabwe and has been an environmental activist since 2006 and was a climate justice coordinator for the Zimbabwe Council of Churches up to 2016. So Gabriel, you have the floor. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Anne. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. Gabriel, just one more announcement. Kindly remember to put your questions in the question and answer chat box just below there as Gabriel speaks to us. Welcome, Gabriel.
Thank you once again. And I'm here today on behalf of the faith leaders, that is the Christians, the Baha'i, the Brahma Kumaris, the Hindu, Buddhist, the Muslim, the African traditional religion, Quakers, and Jewish, to demand not a rebranding of AGRA, but an end to donor funding for the Green Revolution programs. Industrial farming that depends on high chemical inputs and inorganic fertilizers is alien to Africa. We believe that our existence and food production must support other creation who are also entitled to have a life that is free from chemicals. We as SAFCEI, the Southern African Faith Communities Environment Institute, sent a letter to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that was signed by 500 faith leaders who were concerned or are still concerned about the biodiversity loss caused by the inorganic fertilizers, herbicides that poison and create a dead soil. We did not get a response quickly. It took well over 9 months for us to get a response and over a year to be able to meet the Gates Foundation. And even though we have had a meeting, we still have not got what we are asking for, the redirecting of the funding to the smallholder farmers who need this so that they are able to restore the soil that has been damaged through the industrial farming. Africa has contributed very little in terms of emissions, but as we all know, we are having a climate crisis that is driven by the very industrial farming that AGRA is championing in Africa. As people of faith, we are calling on AGRA and we are calling on the funders to stop the industrial farming and support the small-scale farmers who will be living and who have been living in harmony with nature, in harmony with the biodiversity, and to promote the restorative agriculture that is agroecology, one where all living creatures, where all creation is supported. We feel that at this juncture, all funders have a moral obligation to stop this damaging contribution to the climate crisis, the immorality of harming communities and livelihoods, and nature and biodiversity, and undermining soil fertility with chemicals. As people of Africa, guided by our culture and faith, we would like to state today that our Africa, our agriculture, is a cry for recognition as a people that have interacted with our environment for centuries through a lineage of smallholder farmers, pastoralists, forest harvesters, and fisherfolk. I would like us to agree today that Africa has always been green. It was made otherwise by the extractive nature of industrial farming. The Green Revolution is trying to make right that which was made wrong by the same system. The two evaluations that were carried out on AGRA's program have revealed that we cannot use the same system that has brought the problem to solve it. What we need now is a green restoration, and this can only be achieved through agroecology. Bring in the science to accelerate our pace, to meet our needs and not change course to meet the needs of international extractive industrial agriculture. We are calling on the funders that this juncture, if you may redirect your money to the smallholder farmers, to the pastoralists, and to the fisherfolk, please bring them on. Let's have the reference documents that are produced to start off the programs in Africa being a product of the endeavors that are carried out under the big shades of the trees in Africa under the sacred indigenous trees deep in the rural areas, where the conversation will bring about a solution from Africa for Africa, so that we would have our Africa and our agriculture. Looking at the conclusions of the evaluations with the eyes of faith, we see a disregard for the people that are caught in the storm created by the big business mentality. We see the family heads who are forced to mortgage their ancestral land for certified seeds, nitrogen fertilizers, chemical herbicides, and pesticides that are very harmful to our land. Because the green revolution is not a green restoration, we see that the evaluation has concluded that they have lost in the battle to do what Africa has always been doing for centuries. We are calling now for a moral consideration for all, that we have had a system that has failed. 3 evaluations have concluded this failure. The headline objectives of AGRA have not been met. And with that, as people of faith, we are saying it is morally wrong to continue on a failed system. And it is our call that please stop funding agricultural practices that are harmful to our biodiversity, that harms our environment through the greenhouse emissions, that have plunged us into a climate crisis. This practice of farming has hurt the smallholder farmers, and especially so our women. It is our call that Africa has the solutions. Let them be involved and let them do that which they have done for centuries to preserve the biodiversity in Africa. And this they can do through farming that is supportive of all other life in Africa, so that we avoid the climate crisis that is heavy upon us as Africans. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Gabriel. Thank you. And we reiterate your clarion call. We call on funders to stop funding AGRA, a failed model, an initiative that has failed to improve productivity and incomes and food security in Africa. And we ask that we support smallholder farmers in the agroecological practices. We've heard from Ferdinand on what they are doing to improve soil fertility in Africa, and this needs to have more funding going to it. So we have reached the end of listening to our speakers, and would like to open up for the question and answer sessions. We have received some questions in the chat box, and we encourage you to keep on sending them in the chat box so that we can have that interactive session. I'm going to begin by a question by Sipiwe Baleka, and he's asking, are there any African models for effective soil testing programs measuring the organic content of the soil? My understanding is that a minimum organic content for producing nutritionally sufficient food is 3%, and the average organic content of soils is just I think maybe I have lost the question, but I think Ferdinand, you've got the gist of that question, and you can help us in answering it. But before you come in, maybe Ferdinand, let's go through that, the issue of how you measure soil fertility.
Yeah, thank you. Within the agroecology practice, family of practice, we talk about bioindicators, and nature has provided us some bioindicators that we can be able to ascertain the levels of organic matter and level of plant nutrition that can be visibly seen on plants. And science, again, gives us the tools to know which nutrients are lacking in a particular soil, and the remedy here from natural sources. And we can observe from nature. Nobody puts any fertilizers in a forest. And we always say nature is our teacher. And we can be able to see some of the bioindicators. For instance, certain weeds, certain insects, certain plants, certain microorganisms in the soil will indicate a healthy soil. And we're trying to use some of these indicators to revive these soils, because the modern lab can give us nutritional content and be able to tell us a certain percentage of nutrient is lacking. But then that's not all we know about a particular soil. There's so much in the soil that we still do not know how much. A lot is still being discovered, especially on microbial life in the soil, which gives us very good indication on plant nutrition. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ferdinand. I think what Ferdinand reiterates, when we talk about agroecology, we're not saying we're ignoring science. Agroecology looks at how to work on the science, how to work with the farmers to improve on production in a sustainable way, in an ecological way. I'll go to the next question. There are two related questions from Gilbert and Joanna. I hope I'm pronouncing that name well. And their question are related to issues of fertility. Let me pick on that question from them. Knowing that fertilizers are a necessary evil, where can we strike a balance in order to have a sustainable agriculture that also regenerates our ecosystem while feeding the increasing human population? The other question from Gilbert was, with the rising, with the rising challenges of climate change, food insecurity food insecurity, is it possible to avoid chemicals and pests in agricultural productivity in Africa today and meet food demands? Also, Chuana asked from Cameroon, do you believe that we can achieve food security without fertilizer? I'll direct this question to Anuradha and to answer that question as I look at the other questions and combine those that are similar. Anuradha, you have the floor.
Thank you. I think it's very important to start with the narrative when we start talking about, fertilizers are the necessary evil. As the research that has been done, at the Institute, AFSA has produced a lot of research which clearly shows that agroecological solutions work. So this whole narrative of fertilizers are a necessary evil, despite no proof being there that they have actually increased production or they have improved livelihood. In fact, evaluation of AGRA clearly shows that the programs that were launched in 13 countries have failed in drastic ways. So I think the burden of proof is on the fertilizer industry. And as I pointed out, and apologies again for the bad internet connection, that the ones who are benefiting from this push of fertilizers, from the push of this industrial agriculture, are the agrochemical corporations. It is not the African farmers. It is not the African livelihoods. What we are seeing is the agribusiness corporations profiteer from this crisis and continue to push the narrative that to improve food security, we need fertilizers, we need these inputs that the governments are being forced to spend their resources on.
Okay. Further to that, some of the people have asked, some farmers support AGRA because their government subsidize the purchase of fertilizers. For example, the fertilizer input subsidy program in Zambia and other countries. And that's one of the approaches that has created dependency. In fact, one of the criticisms in an AGRA study that was done in 2020, 2021, was that AGRA has been able to influence policy and influence governments to even use their much important resources, national resources, to subsidize fertilizers for their farmers, thereby creating a dependency. And you can see now the multinationals are making millions and billions out of the fertilizers. In fact, they've come together and they're having what they're having these groups, and they're capturing all the excess profit. So I'd like to direct this question to Leonida on the issue of the subsidy program. Do you think it's sustainable?
Oh, okay, what I can say is that with subsidies, it's actually a form of recolonization. And of course, it's also a form of chaining farmers to these agrovets. If I can give an example of Kenya, which I'm most familiar with, you find that even the most remote village in the country has an agrovet, so that these transnational companies are assured of supply of profits because their seeds and agrochemicals are being sold. The other thing I want to say is that with the agroecology can work. For example, if I can give an example of farmers who've transitioned from use of chemicals and fertilizers on their farm and now have adopted agroecology, they confirm that it's working. What we've been doing, for example, is making it as basic as possible. Because if you look at agroecology, it's holistic. It looks at biodiversity, it looks at the soil, it looks at gender relations. It's a movement. It's also about co-creating knowledge. And I'd like to refer the listeners to the principles of agroecology so that you can look at them deeply. For example, what we do with soil fertility, you find that when we go to farmers, we find that they've been using chemicals for a long time. And they'll tell you that their soil is becoming harder. They'll tell you that earthworms are dying. And why are these earthworms dying? Because of the toxicity of the agrochemicals on the soil. So what we do basic tests, as basic as possible, because you know that farmers in Africa are not, don't have access to a lot of support, you know. So what happens is that we do the basic test. For example, how much soil, how many earthworms can you spot on a glass of soil? Every farmer comes with a glass of soil from their farm. The learning is done on a farmer's homestead. And the first thing we do is observe. How many earthworms do you have? How many green matter do you have on your soil? Because agroecology is about life. And if your soil is fertile, it means that even the crops that you're growing on that soil are bound to be healthy crops. So we always allocate, for the farmers that we work with, we always ask them to allocate a small portion of their land, set it aside as part of to practice whatever they learn. And they'll always assure you that with time, because we align our trainings to the farmer's calendar. When they are tilling the land, that is where we have dialogues around soil. Why is our soil losing fertility? How long have you been using synthetic fertilizer? What changes have you seen? And the farmers are saying that their yields are not increasing. You know, if they are told that the more fertilizers you use, the more your yields are going to increase, you find that during climate, extreme weather conditions, for example, what we are having right now, their crops are wilting. So the question is, these things are not working. And if they adopt agroecology, these farmers are becoming community champions. Thank you.
Thank you, Leonida. In the interest of time, I'll continue with the next question, and I'll ask a series right now so that we can save on time. there's a question from Amal Stefanos. Since the African Development Bank and perhaps by extension the African Union have not shown their capabilities to take control of making the decisions that work towards benefiting their citizens and in turn our environment, is there any hope in the free trade area, perhaps a new continent-wide trade bloc to make better decisions? I think this question can be answered by, I'll direct it to Anuradha. Let me pick another question so that we can have a series. We have Amal Stefanos again asking, what tools does AFSA and partners have to challenge the system which continues to structurally cripple the continent and its mainstay, which is agriculture? This question I'll direct to Gabriel Manyangadze. And there is also a question from Angela. Angela, is it that there are no ingredients for these fertilizers in Africa that we can also sell to the West? That will be ably answered by our practitioner, Ferdinand Wafula. And then we have a question from Kundai Ngwena. Can the organizations present from the speaker assist in funding? Okay, I think that's a more of a businessman. There's a question direct to Leonida. Which is the way out of this climate crisis? Drought, floods, heat stress, increased desertification, and soil degradation, depressed rainfall, trade imbalances, and bad politics. Do we have a way out? Leonida, you have your question there. And also, I think we can include this: Africa's population is increasing, but total land holding capacity is remaining static. And this means that the available land for crop production is getting less and less. Can agroecology produce all the food we need to expand for the expanding population? Let's have that series of questions, starting with Gabriel, then Anuradha, Ferdinand, and Leonida. Gabriel, you have the floor.
Thank you, Anne. When we look at what's set up at the moment for AFSA and its partners to challenge the system that has continued to structurally cripple the continent, one of the things that we are doing is engagement. We have engaged the funders, those that have enabled AGRA to actually practice this crippling type of agriculture, to let them be aware of what is actually happening on the ground, because we are the people that are on the ground as the smallholder farmers, as faith leaders who are supporting people on a day-to-day basis, and also as the fisher folk and the pastoralists. Those are part of the people that are in AFSA, and therefore they are speaking out of the experiences that they've had on the land. And this is one of the tools that we are presenting, the reality on the ground. The second part is that science has been involved in evaluating what AGRA has been doing. And two evaluations have both concluded the same thing, that there is more harm than good that AGRA is doing by continuing to support industrial agriculture. As has already been mentioned, they are not only pushing in fertilizers, they are also changing the legislation within the countries of operation, where laws are being imposed on farmers who have practiced for centuries a system of exchange of seeds, a system where they would share their seeds, and that has been effective. And now this is being taken away from the farmers. So our next tool is for us to offer the alternative that has already been mentioned, that agroecology is working. It has been practiced in different parts of Africa, and it is still producing the best that we can actually have. The food produced from agroecology is rated much higher than the food that comes from the industrial farming. more nutrients for it, and it is also healthy for people who are using that to eat. And it is also locally available and dependent on the kind of production that support communities, and one that is also resilient to the shocks, the world trade shocks that we are experiencing now. The shortages that we are experiencing now are also indicative of a failed system. So the tools that we are using are those that have worked for us. This is what we are presenting. And with that also, we are going out to engage those that are responsible for what we are going through. And this is why we are saying, let us defund AGRA so that we would have a restorative type of agriculture. Thank you, Anne.
Thank you. The second person is Anuradha, and I would like to add a third question to you, second and third. Mohammed is asking, how much has AGRA spent so far in the name of helping farmers in Africa, and for how many years? And also another question from David Tagbe from Monrovia, Liberia. I did not hear any of the speakers mentioning one of the major impediments thousands of African farmers face. That is the issue of their yields cannot get to the market because of poor roads and no resources to buy fertilizers and agricultural tools. And they have little access to internet and marketing, and the issue of post-harvest losses. Anuradha, you have the floor.
Thank you, Anne. I think it's also important to remember, just because an institution has the word African development in it, that is actually intended for development of Africa. So as we have heard from our colleagues, when it comes to feeding Africa or the world, or clothing or shelter, people know how to do it. The real problem we have to focus on is how to prevent those who are in power who are making this job impossible. So it is really about the colonization of the institutions, whether it's African Development Bank or whether it is the African Union, which has been forced to cater to the profits of the corporations based in the West. We heard the word neocolonialism, whether it is strategies that are put forward by African Development Bank or in the name of trade. If they are not going to be putting farmers at the center or in the seat of driving it, we will continue to see exploitative policies, which talk about development, which will talk about food security, which will talk about improved livelihoods. But really, they are looking at Africa as a place to be exploited, for its natural resources to be exploited. We talk about that there's not enough land left, while we see land grabs happening all over the continent. We see the large palm oil plantations. We see the continued exploitation of Africa. So I think what we're hearing today is to say not just no to AGRA, but this is really about food sovereignty and sovereignty of Africa as a continent and as countries where policymakers are designing policies that benefit their own citizens, their own farmers, instead of designing policies, as we saw what African Development Bank is doing, to put pressure while it says it provides relief, to attach conditionalities which would benefit the Western corporations, agrochemical corporations.
Thank you, Anuradha. I had added some questions to you, but I think we'll move to the next person who's going to answer. Ferdinand, kindly pick on your question and any that you'd like to add to. Ferdinand.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the good question here about the ingredients. We know the history of synthetic fertilizers, and this has brought us more harm than good. And when we are talking about bio inputs, we're talking about how nature recycles and how we obtain energy from the sun, and trees obtain energy from the sun and convert that into biomass. That biomass, larger percentage of this carbon is put into the soil, and the connection is in creating that balance. When we talk about how ecology,
kindly switch off your video. Yes. Your bandwidth is a bit low. switch off the video and continue answering.
Thank you. Thank you. And when we are talking about fertility, we're talking about a balance between nutrients, mineral nutrients, and microorganisms and organic matter. The three of them have to be in balance for us to have a fertile soil. And why we are focusing more on organic matter and restoration of microorganisms is because the synthetic materials kill microorganisms. And if they kill that, we cultivate on dead soil. Dead soil does not give us nutritious food. And it's a fact, and it's been proven. If you grow organic food where you have about 3% or even more of that, the food tastes better. And the nutrient problem is not just about synthetics, it's about also quality. And we're emphasizing on having quality soil, which is organic, which is natural, which is ecologically balanced, producing us and giving us quality food. And it's just that where there's a will, there's a way. And we emphasize that African governments be able to provide funding towards transition mechanisms. And it is through these transition mechanisms that we can again learn more and have research more on our soils and on our food systems. And then we can make a breakthrough. And what the civil society is doing, what AFSA is doing, this is just complementing what governments are supposed to be doing. And we're just showing the way that this is supposed to be the way. And we urge governments to think about the transition. We have the international panel of experts providing us some good scientific and a very good chronology on how transitions can be enhanced. And I think that is what we need now, to focus on the transition, because the climate crisis, it's a reality. And we are seeing that smallholder farmers are actually feeling the pinch. Too much rainfall at certain times of the year when they do not need it. And at certain times, I mean, the drought.
Yes.
Thank you, Anne.
Thank you. We are pressed on time, and Leonida is going to speak. We are also answering the questions on the live chat. Please have a look. Leonida, as you answer the question, there was a question from Gilbert Nakwea on definition of indigenous and how it can accelerate agricultural production in Africa. And also Winnie Maganga is asking, if we stop funding AGRA, do you have enough sustainable agroecological sensitization that farmers can seamlessly transition to agroecology without having a major gap in production, now that many of them depend on synthetic fertilizer? So Leonida, you have the floor.
Thank you, Anne. In responding to the raised question, especially in terms of can agroecology address the climate crisis? One thing we need to know, first of all, is that Africa's contribution to the climate crisis is less than 4%. So we are actually suffering from problems of which are not of our making. What I want to say in terms of response and linking this to agroecology is, one, agroecology brings back diversity, because with agroecology, you don't plant just one crop, you plant different crops with different nutritional values on the soil, especially in terms of nitrogen fixation and other nutrients. And agroecology is a practice, it's a science, it's also a movement. So in the practice part of it, that's where proper land use management comes in. That's where elements such as water harvesting, you find that in many places when it rains, a lot of water is lost. But with agroecology, farmers get trained on how to save water, on the farm. They're also trained, for example, on which crops they can plant that can act as repellents, so that they don't have to depend on agrovet as a source of solving their problems. And another thing is that agroecology is about recycling. use what is available. So it also helps to reduce the amount of money that farmers spend as far as food production is concerned. And then to the question in terms of whether can agroecology be done on a large scale, it is very possible because if you're able to restore your soil, as Ferdinand explained to us the process, if you're able to restore your soil, you can actually produce a lot. The transnational corporations are putting a lot of pressure on farmers to produce more, but with less space. And to the question around the land becoming smaller, land is becoming smaller because in Africa because of subdivision, and the fact that land appreciates. The other challenge that we have within the continent is the absence of land redistribution. For example, if you look at transnational corporations that are in Africa, ask yourself how much land, for instance, the tea plantations, the palm oils are occupying in the continent, vis-a-vis how much is put to agriculture, and ask yourself how much chemicals are being used by these multinational corporations, especially in producing what is not consumed in the continent. One reason that I can point out that we may be suffering from food crisis is because many a times we produce what we do not consume. We produce for markets in the US and Europe. We don't prioritize our own food. And lastly, I want to say that COVID really taught us that your territorial markets are the best markets. With closure of airports and non-movement of people and goods and services, we found people who are consuming food that was available within their own country. So that really confirms that agroecology is possible, and we can have territorial markets where we can sell our ecologically produced food that is healthy and that is also acceptable within our own environments.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Leonida. Really sharing what experiences from the ground and answering the question, because we keep on asking, can agroecology feed the world? But let us ask ourselves, we have been practicing chemical or synthetic fertilizer-driven agriculture. Has it fed the world? No, we still have many people going to bed hungry, sleeping hungry, and we are calling for a transition to agroecology. Communities have been practicing it before. We need to change the paradigm. We need to move away from this green revolution push in Africa. It failed in Asia. We do not want to have failed systems in Africa. We, as the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa, are a network of fisherfolk, farmers, pastoralists, working in 50 out of the 55 countries in Africa, and we represent over 200 million farmers and people of African descent. And we are calling for our countries to listen to us. The future is agroecology. AGRA has failed. It has pushed for this green revolution model for the last 15 years, has spent over $1 billion US donor funding, but no, out of it is it had said it will double incomes, it will double productivity. That has not happened. In fact, in some countries, it has gone down. And so we call on our governments to listen to us. Agroecology is the future. Let us put money in supporting agroecology, which builds on the soil, builds on the land, is looking at the future, is feeding local populations in a healthy and nutritious manner. Because with the Green Revolution model, is about monocultures, which are not feeding our populations. We have talked this morning, this afternoon, from where you're tuning in from. And we want to alert you that we have the press release already posted on the chat box. Kindly have a look at the press release, download it, and you can use it as you work on your reports and articles. We've also shared our panelists, all the panelists and speakers, their emails, and have tried to answer most of the questions online, even if we have not answered them. We have not got the panelists to speak. We have answered them online. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us and get for us to to speak to you and answer all the questions that you may have. It has been a lovely evening here in Nairobi. There's several articles that we have posted there and already getting the attention that is required for us, pushing that donor governments, the German governments who have been putting money into AGRA, put money now into agroecology, because the future is in agroecology. All these donors need to put money into agroecology. So I want to thank you once again. And I want to thank even our speakers, our people who have been making this happen, the interpreters and everyone, and encourage you to continue communicating with us and downloading what we have sent to you and visit us even in our website. So for now, it has been over about an hour almost, and 20 minutes. And I want to close this. You can reach out with any questions to the emails that are posted on the screen right now. Kirubel from AFSA and Joss from Growing Culture, and we are partners in taking this forward. So thank you very much. Do have a lovely day, a lovely evening, and we wish you all the best. Those who will be going to Rwanda, Kigali, please ask those tough questions for the future of the African continent. Thank you. Asanteni sana.